The British Grand Prix at Silverstone, dominated so often by Nigel Mansell. Can Damon Hill win for Britain? Don't miss it on BBC television. Sadly, James Hunt, who won there in 1977, won't be with us. But in his memory, this tribute to a great Grand Prix driver and a wonderful commentating colleague. Prost gets away well, so does Hill, so does Schumacher, and Wendlinger is coming up well. Brilliant start by the Austrian driver in the Black Sauber. Prost leads, Hill second, Wendlinger is third, and Ayrton Senna is up to fourth position ahead of Schumacher and challenging Wendlinger as they go round the right-hander into the old hairpin. Senna is up to third.
And after being crowded at the start, a quite brilliant couple of corners by Ayrton Senna. Tremendous stuff. He muscled his way back into the contention at Redgate. He's going inside David Hill.
For 16 weekends a year, for the last 13 years, from Australia to Brazil to Mexico, South Africa, America and the whole of Europe, that was how closely James and I used to work together. And because of that, we got to know each other pretty well. And I very rapidly discovered that James was a very special sort of person. He didn't think the way other people do. He certainly didn't act the way other people do. And he was always a very exciting, stimulating and fun, unpredictable but very authoritative person to be with. In fact, it was very obvious to anybody from his very earliest days that whatever James chose to do in later life, he was going to make a success of it.
James Hunt holding the flag up for Britain, driving a superb race in far-off Japan, and James Hunt is going to win the World Championship. Very much the public schoolboy, James was educated in the magnificent surroundings of Wellington College, where he excelled at ball games. But watching a club race at Silverstone whetted his appetite for motor racing. With his good looks and charm, and the fact that it was all fun to him, James was no drab conformist, always the centre of attraction. But under his devil-may-care manner, he was deadly serious about getting to the top. The glamour and trappings of success were to come later, though. It was in Formula 3 that his career started to take off. And James Hunt is through. Hunt is up into second place now, ahead of Trimmer. Trimmer, who was second, has been pushed down to third position by James Hunt, number 21, from Sutton, 23 years old. He's been driving for 3 years, and here he is in the Red Lotus. At circuits like Crystal Palace, James's forceful driving attracted the attention of no less a man than Lord Alexander Hesketh, who recruited James to his unique Formula 1 team.
Hesketh Racing is a team that is made up of rule breakers. And the fact that we've managed to break some of the rules and get away with it. Not the rules written in a book, but the unwritten rules, that you can never come into Formula 1 unless you have a completely professional team, that you can never come into Formula 1 with a driver who has a reputation only for crashing cars, that you can never come into Formula 1 with a team manager who's an ex-used car dealer, that you can never come into Formula 1 with a rich young man who knows nothing about it, that you can never come into Formula 1 with a whole lot of mechanics that no other racing team would hire. I think we've proved something by that. I think that the enthusiasm we have in the team makes up for an awful lot that we lack in professionalism.
How did they start? How did they begin? Hesketh Racing are going to win.
We're all human beings, and if one remembers that fact, we all start with the same physical advantages and or handicaps, and therefore there's no reason on paper why they should be better apart from their advantage and experience.
Our driver we keep in clothing and meals as long as he goes on turning his wheels. His name is James Hunt, known as the Shunt. What he likes best is a nice glass of milk.
The much-derided Hesketh team made their mark in 1973. The next year they had their own car, and James was a spectacular winner at Silverstone's non-championship international trophy. And Hunt going through! James Hunt takes the lead, and Woodcote in an absolutely superb manoeuvre My goodness, that was a consummate bit of motor racing artistry, the like of which I have seldom seen before.
Indeed it was. Hesketh and Hunt, the fun team with the teddy bear mascot, had elatedly arrived.
Come on.
Well done. Right. Congratulations. You had to do it the hard way. What a twist. I didn't. The gear lever came off.
Okay.
Right. Sorry about that. The clutch went on behind and then the gear lever came off on lap 2.
Really tremendous.
They say the first win is always the hardest, but now it really was the big time. 1975, a genuine shot at the World Championship. Second in the Argentine and sixth in Brazil. But round 7 in Holland was sensational. In the gleaming white Hesketh Ford, James drove a race of sheer brilliance to win his first Formula One victory against the might of the twin Ferraris of Niki Lauda and Clay Regazzoni. The amateurs had beaten the professionals. Sheer enthusiasm had defeated massive budgets. 18 years later, Lord Hesketh, now government chief whip in the House of Lords, remembers it all vividly.
One of the things about James was that he had huge support from the British racing public. And we always went to a lot of trouble with our supporters. We used to make a great effort with them. And I remember riding around on the truck after we'd won. And Zandvoort's a pretty gloomy place. It's just a lot of sand dunes. And on top of every sand dune were these just waves, waves and waves of Union Jacks. And it was a wonderful feeling to feel that those people who travelled all the way around Europe and had seen frustration after frustration finally saw the result that they wanted. And even today, which is 18 years later, it still gives me goosebumps.
Now, adored by the nation and partnered by beautiful women, fun-loving James Hunt was a superstar. Niki Lauda was world champion for Ferrari in 1975 and aimed to make it 2 in a row the next year. But now he was up against James Hunt driving for McLaren after a depleted wallet had forced Alexander Hesketh out of Formula One. James and Niki were rivals but always liked and respected each other.
I remember very well in 1976 I had my accident. I couldn't race for 3 races. But James was pressing on all through the year. And I must say today that the McLaren he was driving was not as competitive as my Ferrari. And in the end, he did beat me by 1 point at the Japanese Grand Prix for the championship. So from my point of view, James was an incredible personality because you could see him with the people on the street, talking, low-key maybe, and you could even put him on the table with the Queen of England. He would always know how to behave. For me, he was the most charismatic personalities ever been in Formula One.
With 4 wins for Lauda's Scarlet Ferrari in the first 8 races, 1976 looked a lost cause for James and McLaren, although the Spanish race had seen a second superb Grand Prix win for the Englishman at Jarama, in spite of initially being disqualified for a technical infringement. James stood on the top step of the rostrum in front of King Juan Carlos, 1 step above Lauda. 6 races later, at the Nürburgring in Germany, Lauda nearly died as a hideous fire engulfed his Ferrari. Amazingly, a badly scarred Niki was back 3 races later in Italy for an almost unbelievably heroic 4th place and 3 vital points. James won the next race in Canada and the following round 15 at Watkins Glen in America. Lauda was 3rd, and now the chips were really down for the vital last race in Japan, with a confident Niki leading the championship by a mere 3 points and trying to outsight James.
At 7:45 in the morning, when I was still asleep, there was a great banging on the interconnecting door of my room.
So I went and opened it, and there was Nicky already in his overalls, marching into my room and saying, "Morning, I'm going to be the world champion today."
In the early morning hours, Britain excitedly turned on the TV for pictures from Japan. Despite appalling weather, they looked great as James took control.
And it's James Hunt who takes the lead in the Japanese Grand Prix, with fellow Brit John Watson trying to overtake him as they swoop round the right-handers. Hunt leads from the thing, and fifth, or sixth, is Nicky Lauda.
To win the championship, James had to finish at least 3 points ahead of Lauda, and on lap 3, it looked as though he had them. Nicky's Ferrari was in the pits, and the Austrian was getting out of it. It's madness to race in these conditions, he said, and walked away with James still in the lead.
Oh, and Van Villa chopping inside him. Van Villa trying to get past James Hunt. Hunter's got the line. Van Villa trying on the other side. Van Villa's going through, and Hunter's let Van Villa. No, he hasn't let him pass. Side by side, Van Villa up, and Van Villa spins. And he missed Hunt by inches. This is what James Hunt must have been afraid of.
But the drama continued. In came James with a puncture, down to 5th when he needed 4th. Lauda could only watch and hope. But James finished 3rd for the vital 4 points he needed. He was world champion of 1976 when he arrived home at Heathrow.
James inspired a lot of drivers and a lot of young people in the early 70s, and I can remember watching him actually win the championship in Suzuka when he just got those vital points when Nicky Lauda retired from the race. Just fantastic, and I mean, I'm in shock really today, because I think you'll agree any 45-year-old to pass over at that age is just astounding.
He was always capable of embarrassing somebody with his attitude or a joke. He was not very interested about other people's opinion. He believed very much in his own values and his own reasons, and whether they were sometimes making people uncomfortable or not was not a problem for him. I think even in fact sometimes he was even capable of going too far even for himself, just to let people more uncomfortable with him. But it was his nature, his character, and I like him. I like him the way he was.